person with the disease rather than a caregiver. I think traditionally when we do these narratives, it's really from the point of view of the caregiver. So what makes this unusual, it's about somebody who is in decline but fighting their decline. It's fairly generous. It started with the head of the Alzheimer's Association, who then set me up with several women that I spoke to on Skype who'd been recently diagnosed with early onset. And then I went to Mount Sinai and I had all the tests done, they called mini mentals, they call them, with a neuropsychiatrist, and talked to some clinicians and researchers, and then went to the New York chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, met support groups and other groups of women who talked to me about their experience, and then went to a long-term care facility. So it was like, kind of like boom, 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 all the way through. And then would incidentally like meet somebody's daughter who would say, "What are you doing?" And I'd say, "I'm doing this movie." And she'd tell me about her experience. And it was amazing. So I was kind of armed with all that. You know, then Rich and Wash and I would sit and kind of look at the script and see where we could. Alec Baldwin, can I say, is such an extraordinary actor. And a special guy to me. And, you know, I knew him from 30 Rock. And, woo! And every time I got some comedy, I would, like, email Alec and say, hey, yeah, you know, if I was comedy, let's do this comedy together. And he'd be very politely call me right away and say, I can't do it. It's not for me. It's not for me. And I was like, okay. And then finally, one day he was like, don't you have a drama for me? Do you have a drama? And I was like, well, I do. I said, but I think the part's too small. I don't know if you're going to do it. And I said, he goes, send it to me. And so I sent it, and he was like, I'll do it. And I was just like, Alec, you know? And I was like, okay. And I kept waiting for him to drop out, because I thought, you know, this is going to be big enough for him to do. But he has so much life, so much virility, so much masculinity, and he brought all of that to that part. And so to bring all that to the caretaking stuff, to bring, I can't remember what my point was, but I was thinking was like when Alec, puts on my pants, yeah, right, that's my point. When he puts on my pants, you know, that idea of them being in such a tremendously intimate relationship and him being so vital and so male and so alive with someone who's becoming so diminished and having to do all this kind of caretaking. Oh yeah, this is my point. So at the very end with the ice cream thing, you know, when he says, I'm going to have this flavor, and she says, I'm going to have the same flavor, and he goes, no, you don't like that. And I kind of, while it's all happening, I sort of sidle up to him, you know, and sort of like and that was the kind of stuff that I saw. I saw people really reliant on their caregivers in an interesting way. And I don't know, so all of that stuff was really fascinating to me. Very so compassionate and so lovely. So I was very fortunate to get those two out. And then, like I said, we continued to Skype and talk about the script and whatever. And by the time we were ready, we had the kind of the money and the slot and stuff. They said, we have some urgency about going because Richard has ALS. Yeah. So, well, we were all like, okay. And then when we got there, I mean, Richard was more severe than we'd anticipated, and he'd really lost function from the upper half of his body. So he directed the movie. He and Wash were partners. They're married. We had together for 18 years, and Richard had you know, he directed the movie with an iPad. So everything they did everything together. But Richard was they were both dealing with this disease, and you know. What happened is that basically what we were depicting in the film was what they were going through in real life as a couple. So,
as you're making this, and
yeah.
And as he's directing it too, that's interesting too. He's using an iPad.
Yeah.
And how was that from the point of view of an actor? You know, dealing with that.
Surprisingly easy. And I mean, what's interesting is that I think that for this movie, and I talk about Alzheimer's when I remember the title of the movie, it's called Still Alice, and it's like, you know, if someone is, you know, look, we're all mortal, and we don't face our mortality because it's too tough. But this is about a woman who's kind of facing that and looking at what her life is, and it's who she is essentially too. You know, even with the disease, who is the essential Alice, and with Richard. You know, his language was gone in terms of his verbalization, but his communication was not. And so the person I was communicating was essentially Richard. And oddly, it kind of goes away. Richards was so very, very present in his eyes and in the way he communicated with me that I didn't feel it after a while. And my son, oh, by the way, at the very end, the teenage couple in the park singing, that's my son and his girlfriend.
Making his film debut.
Making his feature film debut, ladies and gentlemen. That's Cal Freundlich and his girlfriend, Charlotte Robson. But yeah, exactly. But what's interesting is that because that was when we were filming that, I had mentioned to my son, I said, our director's going to be there, and one of our directors is ALS, and I want to let you guys know because they're teenagers. And I said, so he doesn't speaks through an iPad, and I don't want you to be alarmed and stuff. And Cal, which is what's great about my son too, and what's great about Richard is Cal was like, Mommy, it wasn't that big a deal. Because Richard does communicate, because he is there, and he is. So what's great about what was great about this lesson is that it is about like I said, how do you reach somebody? Where are they? And I think with Alzheimer's too, there's this idea that somehow people go away, and that was not what I observed. I observed people working very, very hard to be present. And kind of move their way through it, no matter what, at what stage they were in the disease.
Still Alice, the title, right there, as you say.
And she started making I said, how did you know that you were having these difficulties? She goes, I started making this a very easy computer program I was supposed to learn, and I couldn't learn it, and people started noticing what I was doing wrong. And the interesting thing about Sandy, she looks very similar to me. She's taller, she has red hair. And I'm, 3 years older than she is. But she doesn't present, when she came to the set, I introduced her, everybody said, this is my friend, she's my advisor, she's helped me so much. And no one knew she had Alzheimer's disease because Sandy works very hard to concentrate. So the one thing you see about her is that she'll watch and she's really watching everything and really, really trying to hold on. So that was what was so interesting to me is, and I think we all do that with everything. It's how hard people work. And the days that, as an actor, you're always I don't have any lines today, this is going to be easy. That's how I feel. I'm maybe I'll bring something to read. So the days when I was playing, when she was most declined, were the days when I was most exhausted. Because the kind of energy it took, oddly, to concentrate in that state, well, it's that idea of, what's happening cognitively? What are you registering? What are you, for lack of a better word, what are you thinking of? What are the impressions that are happening? Like that last scene with Kristen, she has that beautiful Tony Kushner monologue from Angels in America. And I think, what does Alice hear? She hears the words, and she hears the tone. And the tone sounds lovely, and she sees that, she sees that beautiful girl's face. You see Kristen's face, it's so beautiful, and it's so kind of full of feeling. So it's maybe Alice doesn't understand the words anymore, but she feels the feeling because she sees it on her face. And that's what I saw with some of the patients that I observed too, is that even when they lack language, I noticed that if I said something like, there's this one woman I was speaking to who was 63, whose language was gone. I would be like, hey, what's on the TV? And she'd go, I'd say, that seems pretty funny. And she'd go, and I was like, whoa! It was kind of staggering to me because she so wanted to connect that there was this part of her that was functioning in a way that she was able to mirror me socially and understand emotionally what I was saying. So that's what I thought with that too. It's that thing of what are you seeing? What are you feeling? I wish I knew more. As an actor, you're always just trying to figure out from the signals that you get. But what was interesting about the patients that I spoke to, language or no language, was how social everybody was, how much they gained from the company of the people around them, how much comfort and how much interest and there was just that function still continued. inclined, I would just sit and talk and hang out and to sort of see what they offered me. You know, one woman, this is interesting, Phyllis, her caregiver said, "This is Julie and she wants to talk to you," and Phyllis wouldn't stop looking at her caregiver because she was anxious, and she said she wants to take a walk, and then Phyllis started to walk backwards, and she said, "No, Phyllis, go forward," you know, and I said, "It's okay, I'll go backwards or forwards," you know, and I kind of hung out with her and did whatever, but I mean, it really, I swear to God, it's not any different than like meeting another actor and saying, you know, "Do you like fish or chicken?" And even there was a lady too, she was very funny, who told me to get out of the draft. I was sitting near a window. It was 150 degrees, right, in this room, and she's like, "You're gonna get cold." And then I met her daughter, and I said, you know, she told me to get out of the draft. She goes, "That's my mother." She's, you know, people are essentially themselves, you know, so like personality doesn't change. So it's not as, so it is actually closer to just being like friends with her. And grandmother both died of Alzheimer's, and she's probably around my age, maybe a little bit older, and she chooses not to know. And she's very involved in the Alzheimer's Association, and I was kind of surprised. I think my personality is such that I would be like, "Let me find out. Let me see what I can do. You know, let me." I think it's very difficult for people right now because there's not a lot they can do. I don't know. I found out like what the sex of my children were. I like to find out. You know, I like to know what I'm having for dinner. You know, I like to know when the train's leaving. I would probably want to know. But I did think it was interesting that all the kids in the movie reacted differently and had it, because people do, you know. I mean, some people would say, "What difference does it make?" So where Rich and Wash and I worked most directly was on the language. And I'll tell you an interesting story actually about that speech, that in the big speech I give to the Alzheimer's group, you know, and it was written so beautifully, so very beautifully. But it wasn't initially, and I was like, they wrote a speech, and I was like, this is not right, you know, it's not right. And they wrote it again, and then finally it was a third time, and Wash was already in New York, and Rich was still in LA because he hadn't traveled yet, and Rich was on Skype. And I said, the speech is perfect, it's absolutely perfect. And Wash was like, "Rich wrote it." And he finally wrote it, he was using his own experience. And it was so beautiful, and it took my breath away. And the line that really, really killed me was, I don't want to cry when I say this, like my old self who was so fascinated by communication. And I was just like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna die, it's so good, it's so good." And Rich said, "I didn't want to trivialize what she did for a living," which I thought was really beautiful, because, you know, for Rich, the thing that he wanted to do over this last year is make movies, and they made, you know, Robin Hood, and they made this one, and they've managed to make these movies, and in translating the book, we had to lose a lot, and a lot of what we lost was about this woman's professional identity, because she's a, you know, linguistics professor, and it was very, very important to her. And Lisa Genovese wrote some great stuff about her losing her job and her colleagues and all this stuff. And I think for me as an actor, it was very resonant, because all that stuff is so important to me. And what Richard managed to do, I felt, in that one line, because we had so little time, was encapsulate what that means, you know, that he was saying that my old self was so fascinated by communication. So for me, that was like the best direction ever, because it summed up her entire professional self.
And I mentioned Maps to the Stars, which is, you know, going to be, I think, going to be released for a qualifying run, but open next year.
I play an actress.
Why does she play an actress? And she won a Cannes Best Actress for that. And you as actors, boy, you have to see that movie. Really great stuff. Thank you.